Ni hao, boa tarde, and welcome back, language learners, to Adventures in Language. I'm your guide, Emily. In this episode, I'm sharing with you 5 easy tips for how to make better use of something called corrective feedback. Now, you might be asking, what is corrective feedback? So let's do a quick definition check. Corrective feedback is a pedagogical term that actually means feedback given to correct. Now, for language learners, this means correcting things like our vocabulary errors, our grammar errors, or let's be honest, just our awkward ways of phrasing things sometimes. Problem is, we don't always get the corrective feedback that we need in order to make the progress that we want in the language. And even if we do get that corrective feedback we need, we don't always make the best use of it. Am I right? So in this video, I'm going to give you some quick, easy tips for making the best out of the corrective feedback that you get. And for those of you who might not know me yet, I'm Emily. I'm a linguist here at Mango Languages. I have my PhD in linguistics, and I, over the course of my lifetime so far, have studied 7 different languages, and I've taught both English and Spanish in various countries abroad. So needless to say, the language learning process is very near and dear to my heart. So I'm here to make sure that you're getting the most out of yours. And as always, if you're new here and you'd like to make sure that you're up to date on all of the awesome language content that we have cooking for you, make sure you join the Mango fam by hitting that subscribe button. Now, sin durar más el video, let's get to it. Okay, tip number 1, be adventurous with the language. That means make mistakes, make errors. So if you want to get better at your target language, you're going to need corrective feedback. In order to get that corrective feedback, you need to make mistakes. I know. We hate it. It's uncomfortable. It's embarrassing, but it's worth it. So for example, when I was learning Korean, I was in Korea teaching English, but learning Korean while I was there. And I was just a chatterbox, always talking just a little bit beyond my current linguistic capabilities in the language. And I made tons and tons of errors. It was embarrassing. It was also really funny. And that's how I got to intermediate proficiency in just 2 months. So it is worth it. Now, one of the more memorable examples of how I used mistakes to get corrective feedback and learn is when I was talking with the principal at the school where I was teaching English, and we were speaking in Korean, and I wanted to say something about how much I was excited for this upcoming academic year. And so I said the phrase, or I thought I said the phrase, this year, but actually I said this while pointing to my lovely principal. Needless to say, she laughed, she corrected me, and gave me that corrective feedback. And I can say that I've never confused those 2 vocabulary words again since. So, lesson learned. Bottom line here, guys, is don't play it safe with your target language. Go ahead and make longer sentences, use more complex vocabulary, try that grammatical structure that makes you anxious. Go do it, make the mistakes, and then all you have to do is let the corrective feedback roll in. Which brings me to tip number 2. Tell people that you want to be corrected. Some people are just anti-correction by nature, so they're going to need your explicit invitation in order to give you the corrections for the errors that you make. So you might want to say something like, hey, whenever we're speaking, if I make a mistake, can you correct me and tell me the way I should have said it? This is great if they're able to do it. However, be aware that some people just by their nature might not want to be that person for you, and that's okay. But one way that you can get a little bit more of a low stakes feedback from folks, you can ask a very simple question, which is, did you understand what I said? You can even phrase it like, I don't think I said that right. Can you explain back to me what you think I said? And then the key there is in listening very closely, because they might not give you the explicit correction like, you said this, but you should have said this. Instead, they might just say, here's how I would say it, right? And so that comes down to just being an active listener. Now, this tip, of course, implies that you have surrounded yourself with native speakers, right? And this might be in your classroom. This might be a teacher. It might even just be other students in the classroom who are speaking the target language with you. They can also provide corrective feedback. But you might want to expand your circle of speakers by trying to go out and seek other people who would be willing to speak in the target language with you. So that could be like at a local coffee shop, the library. And if you're finding it difficult to find people in your local area, or let's be honest, maybe you're just like, the social pressure of face-to-face interactions, not what I'm in the mood for today. Fret not, my friends, because you can find a plethora of digital communities in the internet space. So no shortage of access to other speakers in the target language. Okay, tip number 3. Listen for subtle error corrections. Now, this one really comes down to just being an active listener. So there's this strategy of error correction that teachers use all the time, and actually we as just everyday language users do it all the time as well. It's called recasting. So recasting, it means repeating an utterance that someone has said while subtly correcting the error that it originally contained. So for example, let's say that a friend of mine or a student of mine says the following sentence.
I didn't went to the party.
And so I might, in response, subtly recast that by saying, oh, you didn't go to the party? Why not? Now, did you see how subtle that was? If he wasn't paying very close attention, that might just fly totally under the radar. But I did identify the error and I did correct it. Then he, as the student or the friend, the listener, he might say, okay, she just corrected my error. I'm going to take note of that and remember that in that sentence, I should use this verb, not this verb. Okay, so he can do that in his mind, or he can actually take a physical note, which leads me to tip number 4. Tip number 4, store it, review it, repeat it. This one is all about having a language learning journal. Now, this could be physical, it could be digital, kind of whatever works for you. But we know that for language learning in a classroom, it's a great idea to come to class with a notebook. But it's also great to go out into the wild, into real life with a notebook as well. And this doesn't mean you have to carry around a notebook. I sometimes do when I'm abroad, but oftentimes it'll just be on my phone. So just in the same way that I have a to-do list on my phone, I will also have a separate list on my phone just for error corrections that I receive in the wild from native speakers. I do this, for example, when I go to the local Korean grocery store, and I'll have a conversation with the native Korean speaker. And if they recast an error that I made, or if they directly tell me like, hey, that's the wrong word, don't use it, I'll note it down as well. Sometimes I'll do this in the moment. I'll just like whip my phone out, make a quick note so I don't forget. But a lot of times I want to try to stay present in the conversation. And so I'll just take a quick mental note and do it right after I leave the store. Either way is fine. Now, why exactly is keeping a language journal, language learning journal, or notepad a good idea? Well, keeping a journal allows you to offload some of that corrective feedback information. And when I say offload, I mean offload it from your brain. Why is that a good idea? Well, there's this pervasive myth that unfortunately a lot of people buy into, which is that humans only use 10% of the human brain. False. It's a 3-pound organ. We actually use all of it most of the time, and it can get overloaded. So in order to make sure that you're retaining the corrective feedback that you pick up along the way, temporarily offload it onto some kind of a journal, digital or physical. And then the next day when I wake up, waiting for my coffee to brew, maybe I'm at the gym between reps, when I have this downtime, I will then just whip out my phone and I'll start to review the corrective feedback notes that I made for myself. And that, my friends, is how you solidify and concretize all of the little information about corrective feedback that you pick up along your language learning journey. Okay, guys, tip number 5. This is our last tip. This one is synthesize and then prioritize. You can't master everything all at once, even if you want to. I know we all want to. We want to be perfect very fast. But in order to get proficient in a language, languages are complex, so you need to prioritize. Now, this tip is mostly for people who are in the language learning classroom who might have a teacher who gives them a lot of feedback, a lot of corrective feedback all at once. How are you supposed to make sense of that? Where do you start? Well, you start by synthesizing. So for example, if I'm looking at an essay and the teacher has just X'd out everything, I don't know where to start. what I'm going to do is start to find patterns for types of errors that I've made. So it might be past tense verb conjugations seem to be a common theme, or vocabulary choice might be a theme. So this is how you make sense of the corrective feedback that you have. And then from there, you have to prioritize it, right? So which part is more important right now? Is it studying the vocabulary, or is it going to be studying the past tense verb conjugations? And for that, you can rely on the advice and the guidance of your teacher, or you can go with your intuition. Well, friends, that is it. Now you have the 5 tips, my 5 favorite tips for how to make better use of corrective feedback on your language learning journey. So let's review them one more time. Tip number 1, be adventurous in the language, make mistakes. Tip number 2, tell people that you want to be corrected. Tip number 3, listen closely for those subtle error corrections. That's the recasting part. Tip number 4, store it, review it, repeat it. And tip number 5 is synthesize and then prioritize. Now, one thing you should know is you don't need to try all 5 of these tips all at once, right? Actually, I'd recommend that you pick your favorite 1, maybe your favorite 2 tips, the ones that resonated with you the most. Try those, run with them, and see how it goes. And please let me know in the comments how it's going for you. I love to check in and see how your language learning journey is going. Now that you've finished the video, I hope that you have a better understanding for what corrective feedback is, how to get it, and what to do with it once you have it. If you liked this video, please let us know by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. And if you have an idea for another video that you'd like to see, or you have a language question that you'd love us to answer, please let us know by writing in the comments. 再见, ciao, ate mais, and I look forward to seeing you back here next time. Bye. Don't forget to get your free Setting Good Goals worksheet, which you can access through this link on the screen. In next week's video, we're diving into the fluency illusion. If you want to be the first to know when that video is released, then subscribe to the channel and go ahead and ring that notification bell. If you haven't yet watched all of our other language learning tips and tricks videos, then I invite you to check out this playlist, which is chock full of language learning tidbits. Well, adventure on, my friends.